We are live.
Good morning. My name is Maggie Ullman. I am the chair of the Environment and Safety Committee here at the City of Asheville. And I'd like to welcome you to our March 28th, 2023 remote meeting. All council committee members and staff are participating virtually. And to help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you who are with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9477. Your phone will be muted, and then you'll hear the meeting live. And at this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. So after those opening remarks, I will go through a quick roll call to introduce the council and staff who are here. Say hey for us. First off, Vice Mayor Sandra Kilgore.
Good morning, everyone.
And Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
We have our city manager, Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
We also have our city attorney, Brad Branham. Oh, just kidding. We have John Maddox, who is our attorney for this, and we're glad you're here, John.
Thank you.
We have our sustainability director, Bridget Herring.
Good morning.
Our Parks and Recreation director, D. Tyrell McGritt.
Good morning.
We have Police Chief David Zach.
Good morning.
And we have our Fire Chief, Scott Burnett.
Good morning.
And our Assistant Fire Chief, Patrick Crudup.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right. Hey, everybody. Let's get started. We have a full agenda, a lot to talk about, a lot to learn together today, and pretty exciting conversation ahead. So as we look at our agenda, we will go ahead and open up at the beginning. And I think we also still have at the end an opportunity for public comment. So is there anyone in the queue that would like to start off with public comment today?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
One moment.
Thanks, Katie.
Caller ending in 5584. Your line is now open.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can. Welcome.
Okay. Our APD needs a dramatic salary increase. They also need health benefits. Our city has been in a long and protracted culture war against the Asheville Police Department. The culture war has engaged in forms of entrapment demonstrated in the recent Aston Park debacle. When the body cam footage was released to the public, it demonstrated how incredibly professional that the APD was. After many, many warnings given to this group, they still decided to stay in the park. And when the police showed up, they still were incredibly professional. Enough is enough. This city is tired of suffering from flagrant crime that's happening on all of our major corridors and in our downtown. The only way for that to be mitigated is by a strong police presence, like the one that we used to have 3 years ago. So we're asking that our city strongly support the Asheville Police Department in the upcoming budgetary discussions. And also remember, they need health benefits just like you and me. Thank you for your public service. Goodbye.
Thanks for joining us and sharing your comment today. I really appreciate it. Katie, are there any other folks in public comment joining us at the top of the hour?
Yes, there are. One moment. Caller ending in 0550. Your line is now open.
Hey, good morning. My name is Gary Woods, and I agree with the first caller. We absolutely must support our police department. As a man of color and a member of the LGBTQ community, I can speak firsthand of my interactions with them. If any of you have ever lost your mother unexpectedly, it's a hard thing. And I remember how my parents used to speak so fondly of them. And the way they looked after them. And unfortunately, I had to, I reached out to them to do a welfare check. And unfortunately, it did not turn out so well. My mom had passed away at her home unexpectedly. But the level of compassion and professionalism that they demonstrated in such an hour of need for me, it goes beyond measure. And just for what they see on a daily, it should be a no-brainer that we would support higher pay and health benefits. And I would imagine that mental health is also part of that equation. And like I said, it's just all of my interactions with them has been extremely positive. They are probably one of the most professional agencies that I've had the pleasure of engaging, and I've lived all throughout the country. So hopefully you guys will get behind them. And like the first caller said, you know, everything is pretty rampant here. We ask a lot of them, and each day and night, 24 hours a day, they stand up and they do their job. And with so many people targeting them. But again, thank you for the time, but I fully and unequivocally support the Asheville Police, and I hope you guys do the right thing and give them that raise and health benefits. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and joining us. Katie, do we have other callers?
Yes, we do. Caller ending in 2425. Your line is now open.
Good morning, everybody. Many of you know me on a personal level. My name is Tom Tesser. I have presented to council many times, and I can't implore the idea enough that APD needs to be fully funded and brought back to full service. I understand there are a lot of other imperatives like the environment, like sustainability, racial equality, and all of these other issues. But if we don't have a safe city, all of that other stuff doesn't matter. If somebody does not feel safe walking out of their house, if somebody doesn't feel safe going downtown and enjoying our merchants and our restaurants and our sites that we have downtown, then what are we here for? It means nothing, because nobody is going to enjoy going out and seeing our city and enjoying what our city has to offer. So that means giving full retirement benefits, medical benefits, and upping the pay so that we are the most, I would say, competitive salary-wise in the region, so that officers want to come here. And something very simple that council and mayor, manager can do is to support our APD on an emotional, mental level, and to give them all the support that they need, not to vilify them and to hold them out as scapegoats and to throw them under the bus anytime any of the city initiatives go south. They are here to help. There are always going to be bad actors in every profession, and those folks have to be pulled out and have to be taken care of. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Give enough money so that we can bring in officers laterally, so we don't have to have, as Chief Zach has said multiple times, a 10-year window to get the department back up to full staffing. So that's what I want to say. I hope you take it to heart, and we will continue to press our message throughout the remainder of the time until the budget is published, and we are keeping a very close eye on that budget. That is the litmus test. The money is either going to be there or it's not going to be there. And if it's not there, well, I don't even want to think about what the implications of that are going to be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, caller. And I think that's the last in our queue. Is that still right? Yep.
We
All
have
right.
someone else. One moment.
Oh, okay.
Caller ending in 4192. Your line is now open.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I just wanted to call to voice my support for APD's raises, voice my support for them to have better increased health benefits, and to point out that, I know that they get a bad reputation when it comes to the homeless outreach and homeless, situation that we have going on. But recently I met a young lady that was pregnant under a bridge who had immediate need. And I called every outreach in the city and nobody helped me. And I called APD and they were the only ones to answer the phone and actually get something done for this young lady. And thank God they did, because she soon thereafter went into labor. So I just want to point out that I really appreciate them coming through, and that I really appreciate them doing that, even despite all of the bad reputations that they continue to get around homeless encampments and clearings and all the things. So I hope that you all will show your support within the budget, spend some money on this, and listen to the community, because there's a lot of community members, community groups, and downtown business owners who are looking to you right now to hear your constituents and do as they're hoping that you will, and support APD in every way. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie, any additionals?
That is it.
Thanks for helping connect that. Appreciate everybody calling in. We also have a public comment at the end, so perhaps we'll hear from some more neighbors. To go ahead and get into our agenda, the first item is approval of the February 28th minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And any second?
I'll second. Sandra, second.
Great. And a roll call vote. Councilwoman Smith,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kilgore,
Aye.
and Councilwoman Ullman, aye. The motion passes. Okay, so next we are going to hear from our Sustainability Director, Bridget Herring. Last month, she came and shared a presentation on the Municipal Climate Action Plan, and we wanted a little bit of time to think and talk in community, and she's back to share another presentation or maybe some updates before it goes to council today. We are seeking a vote from this committee to see if we are comfortable moving this forward for full council consideration this evening. Bridget, welcome. I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, and good morning, members of council and those from the public that are tuning in. Again, my name is Bridget Herring, and I'm the Sustainability Director here today to talk about the Municipal Climate Action Plan. You can go to the next slide. So the key takeaways, and some of these are review from the last time I was here, but the purpose of this Municipal Climate Action Plan is to update the 2009 Sustainability Management Plan with the additional sustainability goals that council has adopted since that time. The scope of this plan is focused on municipal operations, where I believe there's significant opportunity to impact climate adaptation and mitigation. The document is a result of some intense engagement with the Sustainability Advisory Committee and staff from almost every city department. What really excites me about this document is that it suggests an implementation sequence that can make the most out of some of our limited resources. And that this is the second time that you're hearing about this, and we were able to incorporate some of those suggestions from last time into the plan. So if we can go to the next slide. Some of these next slides are a little bit of review of where we were. So again, this shows a timeline. This isn't an exhaustive list of all the policies council has passed since 2009, but some of the heavy hitters. And so just want to make sure that we recognize that the update of the carbon reduction goal is incorporated into this document. The Food Policy Action Plan, which was adopted in 2013 and also updated in 2017, is incorporated into this document. The waste reduction goal also incorporated into this document. The renewable energy goal and the climate emergency and the action steps that were incorporated in that, such as the Climate Justice Initiative, are also incorporated into this plan. Next slide. So the plan comes up with 22 recommendations that are organized into 3 goals. I know you can read the goals that are on the screen, so I'm going to summarize them in my own words. So the first goal I think about is our physical assets, the things that the city owns, operates, and maintains. We want those things to be efficient, sustainable, and resilient. The second goal is really about how we embed sustainability into how we make decisions and ultimately utilize our public resources in the annual budget. And lastly, how we use our position in the community and the resources we have to make sure that our residents and our businesses have access to live sustainable and resilient lives themselves. So moving on to the next slide. I know this slide is a little fuzzy. It's a screenshot from the plan. So those of you who want to see it better, it's on page 5 of the document. But this just gives us an overview of how we got to where we are. So since we weren't looking at adopting any new policies, we took at what we heard from the community when those policies were adopted, talked to the Sustainability Advisory Committee and staff to kind of formulate, the laundry list of options. Then our Sustainability Advisory Committee determined what the prioritization factors should be to determine what were the final recommended activities in the plan. And those prioritization factors were impact, feasibility, and opportunity to advance equity. So then I went through a number of iterations beyond that. And before it came to environment and safety last month, the Sustainability Advisory Committee did unanimously recommend that council adopt the Municipal Climate Action Plan and the green boxes around where we are today. So hoping to have some action from you all before it goes to council this evening. Next slide. The result from this plan is 22 recommended activities, as I mentioned, that are organized into those 3 goals. And something else that's really exciting about this document is that it includes a sequencing table that kind of organizes the things into short, medium, and long-term priorities. And the way that we came up with laying out that sequencing was to look at the overall impact of each activity, how long it might take to implement, what staff is really going to be heavily involved in implementing it to make sure that we were spreading that out and balancing it with the staff capacity that we have, and to leverage current opportunities like the Inflation Reduction Act. Also, we don't know what our opportunities are going to be in the future. So I think this allows it to be a living document to say if another opportunity comes up, if another priority arises, we can look at the sequencing table and say, do we want to shift something forwards or backwards to be able to meet the moment that we're in? So next slide. So the requested action that I'm coming to you today is hopefully for support to move this forward to council with a recommendation for adoption. And then I'll just wrap up again with the key takeaways of where we started. So next slide. So again, we're updating a document to incorporate the goals that council has adopted since 2009, which is the previous plan that we have on the books. The scope of this plan is municipal operations and is a result of engagement with the Sustainability Advisory Committee and city staff. The document suggests an implementation sequence to maximize the opportunities and the resources that we have available to us, and that we were able to incorporate some of the suggestions from last time. And I guess I should mention that last time, Councilwoman Ullman suggested that we add stormwater into the activity that talks about state policy engagement. And so we were able to incorporate into that activity to make sure stormwater was called out specifically. So high level snapshot, I know you have a lot on your agenda today, but wanted to give a quick review and then see if you have any questions.
Thanks, Bridget. Appreciate hearing some of the framing again. Appreciate that you were able to kind of fold stormwater in like we talked last time. We've been dedicating staff time to work on state level energy policy for some time, and it takes a long time. And so starting to point our path towards stormwater as well so we can be even more prepared. I appreciate that we've been able to incorporate that policy direction. Yeah, I guess I'll just repeat what I've shared in the past about this, that this is so hopeful to me. I read this plan and I think that this has a lot of ambition. It carves a path for us to be on for quite some time, so we get some real clarity on where we're going. And then it's tempered by our, trademark sensibility and pragmatism. And I just really appreciate that in a context where cities in North Carolina cannot do the type of climate change strategies that cities in other states can. There's a lot of real strategic thinking here for us to really leverage and maximize what we could potentially do. Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I also will say, having been stewarding the first climate action plan that was adopted in 2009. It just tickles me that we are still leaders in this, and that cities are really, in the absence of federal and global aggressive change, cities are still leading our communities in this direction. So I'm just so grateful for all your leadership. Teammates on council, any comments or questions from y'all?
Only thing I can say is I'm glad to see it moving forward and finally sort of, because the community has been asking for this for so long, and they feel like we've just sort of dropped the ball, and now showing up that we are committed to moving forward. And thank you, Bridget, for the.
I don't have a comment, but I will like to make a motion if I can pull it up here. I'd like to make a motion to approve. I'm trying to find it.
It was up on that slide if someone wants to put it up too.
Got it. To adopt the municipal climate action plan for municipal sustainability goals and initiatives.
All right.
Cassandra, I'll second.
Fantastic. Roll call vote. Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Aye.
And myself, Councilwoman Ullman, a hearty aye. Let's do this. Can't wait to have this conversation with the full council this evening to hear what some of our other colleagues think and to just get all of us really excited about doubling down and working even harder on these awesome strategies and goals and programs. Thanks so much, Bridget. All right. Next, we will move to look at some other planning efforts where we're looking up and looking ahead at the future we want and how we're going to get there. This next agenda item is item 4, and it's with our Parks and Recs Director, Dee Tyrell, who's going to speak to us about the comprehensive Parks and Recreations Master Plan. And my understanding is similarly to the sustainability plan. We've had these plans in the past, and we're in a cycle of really looking up and looking ahead, and excited to hear what you're here to share. Dee Tyrell, go for it.
Good morning, Chair, Councilor Ullman, Vice Mayor Kilgore, Councilor Smith. For the record, I'm Dee Tyrell McGirt, Parks and Recreation Director with the City of Asheville. Before I go any further, I do just want to recognize a couple of key staff, Pete Wall, our Parks and Recreation Assistant Director, and Al Hoff, our Landscape Architect, within the department that have done a lot of heavy lifting to get us to this point in the master plan process where we're coming to you asking for the approval to continue to move forward. Next slide. Some key takeaways, some things to keep in mind. As you mentioned, Councilor Ullman, we've gone through this process before. The last Parks and Recreation Master Plan was completed and adopted by Council back in 2009. We've started this process of looking at a new updated master plan process back in November. Staff came together, started talking about the things we would like to see in the master plan process, what's needed, a list of deliverables, and ways to make this master plan process special. We don't want anything that's been done before or things that we see in other municipalities, but what are some things that are going to be really innovative and set this master plan process apart? The RFP was issued back in January. A consultant was selected in February, and now we're here. We're recommending that this committee, along with council, approve the hiring of a consultant as well as the contract for this comprehensive master plan process that we're proposing. The last thing is, if approved, we'll continue to come back to this committee and provide updates on the progress, where things stand over the course of the year as we go through the master plan. Next slide. The purpose is simple. We just need an updated plan to kind of guide decisions, both on the infrastructure side as well as the programming side. A lot of times when we think about Parks and Rec and master planning, a lot of those efforts are heavily concentrated on the infrastructure, facilities, and those improvements that are needed. But we also know that we need to take a hard look at the recreation side, the programming side, to make sure that our efforts really align with how people are currently recreating and the needs of the community and what they want to see in their future recreation needs. There have been a lot of changes within Parks and Rec over the years. Those changes now allow us the opportunity to focus heavily on community recreation. So as we move forward with a master plan process, this gives us an opportunity to dive deep into, again, what are the needs of our residents and businesses as it relates to recreation planning, and then how do we focus heavily on those plans moving forward. Next slide. Some key outcomes for us include taking a look at all of our recreation facilities, programming as they stand right now, as well as how do we see ourselves in the future, pulling substantial information from the community and engaging in a really robust community engagement process. I mentioned a little bit earlier that our focus now is on community recreation and how do we provide that more deeply. As we look at community recreation, our priorities within the department are focused on 3 areas: equity, innovation, and sustainable practices. So as we talk about Parks and Rec, we want to look at how do we prioritize those programs and our capital investments equitably across the system. What does innovation look like as we talk about the future of Parks and Rec here in Asheville? We feel Asheville is prime place to not be status quo, but how can we move to the next level in terms of recreation offerings? And then, of course, anything that we do, we want to make sure that we have some sustainable practices in place. The last piece of this is informing the community, informing the public of what recreation is, in an effort to build support to get the community supporting this effort. Next slide. So the process here, the timeline is, if approved, we'll move straight into the springtime with collecting data. The summertime would take us into doing an assessment of our parks, our programs, administrative operations. That would take us into the fall, where we'll get a chance to look at community parks, take a deeper dive into the recreation needs. We hope by the end of this calendar year to have some solid recommendations based on community engagement, based on continue to work with the consultants on how we eventually see this master plan process playing out and what are some of the recommendations that are coming from it. And by next spring, this time next year, have a strategic action plan in place that will kind of set us up for the next 10 years in parks and recreation planning. Next slide. Current work and next steps. Like I said earlier, we started this process back in November. RFP services were issued back in January. A consultant was selected in February, and we're here. We're here asking for this committee, along with council, to approve a contract with Design Workshop, which is based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, to do our comprehensive parks and recreation plan. Again, that will guide the next 10 plus years of the department. If approved, we're ready to move forward, get the contract going in April, and then be ready to have our first kickoff meeting this spring, most likely next month. Next slide. Our requested action is to have council move forward with the city council with a recommendation to approve the contract to hire the consultant for the development, again, for the Parks and Recreation System-wide plan. Next slide. Happy to take any questions this committee may have.
Thank you, Dee, Tyra, for the report. What I'd like to say is, I'd like to thank you for all the hard work that you've done in the recreation department. I can tell a difference. That was one of my concerns when I came on council, was sort of expanding the recreation department, where it actually sort of spilled over, especially in the communities that were impacted. A lot of the communities that basically did not have these services or access or programming. And you've stepped in the last, year and a half or whatever, and I've seen remarkable inroads made towards, correcting that. And that to me means a lot. And I'd like to thank you very much. And also, as far as, like you said, being able to move forward with the consultant, I think that's a great idea, because what it actually does, even though you bring your experiences, you're willing to accept, different points of views from all different areas in order to expand, because you want us to invest. And I greatly appreciate all of that.
Thank you, Councilor Kilgore.
I have one question, and I know that, we're at kind of the phase of scoping the project happened earlier, and I'm sure other came to councils probably before my time, but especially in light of the rest of our agenda today, where we're going to talk a lot about public safety, I see a lot of linkages to the community building that happens through our parks and recreation facilities and services, and what community building can do in that chain of reactions that ends sometimes in law enforcement, right? If we're building heartbeats and safe spaces and places where folks can go. And so I wonder, within this master planning process, which is a time like you're calling out to be innovative and creative, is there a way, like, how could we incorporate some of that lens that not only do we want to get to the objectives and outcomes like you were saying, but that community building as it ties to public safety is some of the objective that we want to have? Because I think a lot of times when we think about public safety, it's very traditional in the lens of law enforcement. And I'm glad we have law enforcement, and that's one of our services. But that happens at the end of a long chain of reactions that gets people into a police car. And I think there's so many beginnings that start with Parks and Rec that never go in that direction. So I don't know if I have a really concise comment. I just want to create that linkage, because when I've talked with you, Dee, I hear that connection. And when I've talked with other counselors, we see how community building is a big role of ours. So I don't know, maybe just, do you have any reflection on, is that kind of a lens that's being applied, or do you see that type of direct connection being made explicit in plans like this? Is this a junction to really try and get as creative as we can to call out that service as it relates to public safety?
Absolutely. I try to be real quick and concise with this. Again, the changes that have been made over the years with Asheville Parks and Recreation is now that we have that opportunity to focus strictly on community recreation. I think we're going to hear that as we involve the community in this robust community engagement process. We're hearing it already. It's going to come out that the community is asking for, what does more equitable recreation opportunities look like? How do we provide more services in the centers that we have? How do we expand the current operations? So we're hearing it now. I predict that we're going to continue to hear that as we go through the community engagement process. And then I just want to emphasize again that equity and innovation are the highlights. Those are the focus things that we have concentrated on as we provide services, programming, and moving forward and planning within the department. So I think the community recreation focus, specifically equity, innovation, the public engagement, and coupled with what we're already hearing, is going to tie into services that the community wants to see us provide, which will hopefully have some results in terms of public safety and some end results that can kind of curb some of what we're seeing right now.
Thanks for speaking to that. And it sounds like, through many planning processes, some of the outcomes are, what are the goals we want to achieve? What are the programs? What are the improvements? That type of thing. And I think what I'm hearing is what you're hearing, what we're hearing in the community is that link is, people see that full connection link, and that this plan will help us articulate that. I'm very excited for that. I really think your leadership pointing towards innovation and equity is very strategic, and it's exciting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Maggie, you kind of covered what I wanted to ask Dee Terrell about. Maybe the end of last year, your staff and some community members met about this very conversation. How do we engage young adults early off and get them really involved to kind of deter some of the idle time that they have that may lead to criminal activity or bad decision. Where has that conversation gone, and do you believe that is a target audience, not only in your engagement, but also in your program development?
Yeah. So again, a lot of times when you go through a master plan process, the focus is on the infrastructure, the capital projects, improvements that need to be made. Part of what we're doing with this master plan process is also including the programming side, the recreation side. So we know that from my observation, there are a lot of services here in Asheville. And the last thing we want to do is be in direct competition with anything recreation-based or related. So we want to understand what all the services are, what are all the other recreation-based opportunities there are for Asheville residents, and then what makes sense for Asheville Parks and Rec to actively be programming. Where does it make sense for us to really focus our attention, our dollars, our investments in terms of recreation opportunities? So this process will give us an opportunity to bring some consultants in, take a look at everything that's being offered here in Asheville. And it may make sense that we don't do a lot of outdoor rec, that we focus more on neighborhood recreation, that sort of thing. So the process will give us an opportunity to evaluate, assess, do some benchmarking with some other like municipalities to make sense of our direction and future planning for the recreation side of the house. So I think what we're doing by involving the recreation side in this master plan process is pretty different from how master plans are traditionally done.
When you brought up neighborhood recreation, it makes me think about some of the territories that come along with neighborhoods and some of our gang activity. So in building out this plan and proper implementation so that we do have a stronger sense of belonging and community in our programming and how we deliver, would you all consider taking on the initiative of creating safe zones where all community members, no matter their affiliation or no matter their zip code, they're welcome?
Yeah, like I said, these are some of the comments and feedback that we're hearing from community members now. I think it's just going to involve us diving deeper into those conversations. But we're willing and welcome diving deeper and having them.
Great questions. Other thoughts?
I'll make a motion. I make a motion to move forward to City Council the recommendation to approve a contract to hire the consultant for the development of a park and recreation system-wide plan.
This is Sandra. I'll second.
All right, roll call vote. Councilwoman Smith?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kilgore?
Aye.
And myself, aye. The motion passes. This will move forward to council for full consideration.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thanks. Yeah, so our next item really does play into the conversation we're having. We're having a comprehensive conversation today of the various places that we're looking at community safety. The next item, item number 5 on our agenda, is a look at the crime data and our recruitment update. Our police chief, David Zach, will take us through that conversation. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you and good morning. Again, what we'll be looking at today is our year-end crime report for 2022. But we also want to highlight some operations that we conducted over the past year that have proven very, very successful for us. And again, we will touch on where our recruiting effort stands currently. So next slide, please. Key takeaways from this presentation: although violent crime trends are discouraging, we are committed to ensuring Asheville continues to be a safe place to live, do business, shop, recreate, and visit. 2022 violent crime trended at historically high rates, both nationally and in Asheville. We can certainly see where our violent crime, where it's increasing, and it's definitely increasing in 2022 by a 17.4% increase in aggravated assaults. In spite of the serious deficit of resources, we are aggressively deploying officers to respond to various types of crimes, especially violent crime. To effectively address increasing crime in our community, we must continue to strengthen public safety as a responsibility of every sector of our community. Next slide, please. On the good news side of the chart, what we are seeing since 2019 to 2022 is a significant decrease in property crime. So that is definitely some good news. From 2021 to 2022, we saw another almost 5% decrease in property crime. Property crime is defined as burglary, larceny or theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson. And that's according to the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting. Can we slip ahead 2 slides, please? Okay, and now the bad news. Violent crime has continued at historically high rates. From 2021 to 2022, we saw an actual 17.5% increase in violent crime. But as you can see, going all the way back to 2013, this rise in violent crime has been pretty steady from year to year. So it is at a very high historic rate, and we're doing our best to address that. So if we could go back now to slide 4, I'm sorry for that. I spoke briefly of some targeted operations, so I kind of want to tell you some of the ones that we've conducted over the past year, and this is now kind of flowed into this year. Because of the staffing crisis that we're dealing with, sustained presence for us has been difficult. But as we collect data and analyze data and try to pare it down to see where we'll be most effective, we've conducted some very targeted operations, which have been very successful. For example, earlier in the year, we were seeing targeted break-ins and window smashing downtown. We deployed teams of officers at various points, times of day, and on specific days in an attempt to address those break-ins. We did arrest 2 persons who were responsible for a number of those break-ins. There were 12 other arrests during that operation. We had issued 12 citations, gave out 48 verbal warnings, and conducted almost 658 business checks as we were working on that operation. And again, we were able to make arrests on the 2 persons who were involved in those window smashings. We've conducted several different operations to target habitual shoplifting at some of our big box stores when we received complaints from those stores that their shrinkage was very high. So again, we can't always provide consistent presence, but what we can do is run specific operations that work within a specific time frame. So we were up in the South Tunnel Road, Swannanoa River Road, Brevard Road, Smoky Park Highway area. Those particular operations netted 73 arrests, where 127 charges were issued, 33 of which were felonies. We also recovered methamphetamine, fentanyl, and ecstasy pills, along with some firearms. So those operations that were very targeted, very specific, yielded very large results. From September 28th to October 28th, when we were looking at our violent crime mapping, we were seeing that specifically downtown, our Old Charlie district was very much, the numbers on violent crime were rising. So we went in, we targeted the downtown area during that period. From September 28th to October 28th, we made 60 arrests, issued 172 citations, and 277 verbal warnings. So what we know from that operation, not only were we concentrating on what might be lower level or nuisance crimes, what we did see was a significant drop in aggravated assaults. that were occurring primarily downtown. So if you look at 2022, during that same time period, we had 7 aggravated assaults during 2022, the same time period. When we conducted that operation, the number reduced to 1. So our presence does matter. When we look back where we had the window break-ins downtown, again, the targeted operations that we had down there, again, we saw a dramatic reduction in aggravated assaults. So already this year, in January of 22, we had 5 aggravated assaults downtown. In January 2023, 1. In February of 2022, we had 4 downtown. Again, only 1. Already in March, in 2022, we had 6. We only had 3 in 2023. So we are seeing significant progress when we conduct these targeted operations. So hopefully we'll be able to sustain that, continue to monitor our data, and continue to deploy our resources as best as we possibly can and have the greatest possible effect. But again, unfortunately, presence matters. We can't always be visible as much as we'd like, but when we do target our operations, they are very, very successful. Next, please. Homicides, unfortunately, we did see 11 homicides in 2022, up slightly from 2021, but again, the data doesn't show a dramatic rise nor a dramatic decrease. It's been fairly consistent, probably since 2016, so no major, what I would consider statistically significant increases in homicide. Next, please. Over the last 5 years, there were 52 homicides reported in Asheville. In 2022, our criminal investigative division was staffed, we were down over 55%. However, that did not affect our current clearance rate dramatically. We were at 63% in 2022. When you talk about the national average in 2020 and 2021, the national average for clearance rate of homicide is 50%. So despite being down 55% of our investigative staff, we're still higher than the national average clearance rate for homicide. As of 2023, we've had 3 homicides in the city. All 3 have been cleared and solved. So that's some good news. Next, please. This is something we've been concentrating on. It's really been a 3-year effort now in trying to reduce the number of shots fired calls for service in the city. So you can see our efforts from 2020 to 2022. We've seen 2 years of steady drops in shot fired call. We would attribute that for APD's ability to target and take off the street the city's most violent offenders. So we are seeing those shots fired calls coming down, which again has been the result of a sustained effort on the part of our detectives, our impact team, and our patrol division being very, very diligent. Next, please. Where there's good news, there's sometimes bad news. While shots fired calls have come down, we did see an increase over the past year of the number of people who were injured by gunshot fire. We had 2021, we had 31, 2022, the number went up slightly to 36, but again, lower than the number that we had in 2020. So unfortunately, although the number of shots fired calls reduced, we did see more people hit than we did a year ago. Next, please. Again, when we talk about what's been driving violent crime in the city, you can see from 2013 on, it has just been a steady increase in aggravated assaults. We saw a almost 22% increase from last year. So this is really what's driving our violent crime numbers. And this is where we're trying to isolate those areas and be able to deploy officers as effectively as possible to get those numbers down. And again, as I stated earlier, some of the targeted operations that we've done have brought those numbers down. So we'll see, and hopefully in 2023, we can see for the first time in a long time, a reduction in aggravated assault. But that's where we're focusing our efforts primarily. Next, please. We did see a reduction in rape. Again, it's very difficult to be proactive in this area, and the numbers are pretty consistent over time. And this is one of those categories of crime that are just, again, very difficult to be proactive with. Next, please. Robbery is up slightly, almost 16%. We were in worse shape in 18, 19, and 20. We had a nice drop in 2021, but again, the clock ticked up a bit in 22. But again, I would not call that, statistically significant. Next, please. While we saw a drop in robbery, we did see a 20% increase in armed robbery. But again, you can see since 2018, those numbers have been pretty level. Next, please. So I guess if you'd like, I could take some questions on the crime data before we get into our recruitment efforts.
The only question I have, Chief Zach, thank you very much for the report. It was very informative, I'm quite sure, for me and also for our audience. But one thing I want to ask you, when you talk about the increase in aggravated assaults, do you have any kind of breakdown as to what, as what's the reasoning behind or the cause behind certain ones rise, the numbers rise higher in certain categories? Do you have a breakdown as to what is actually causing that?
I mean, aggravated assault is assault with a weapon. So, I mean, sometimes that can be domestic related. Sometimes it can be, a fight in the streets. Sometimes it can be a dispute between rivals. It's all over the board what might be a causation factor for aggravated assault. What we really do is concentrate on where they're occurring. And we know wherever they're occurring, if we're able to provide a sustained presence, we see the numbers go down. Causation is difficult to nail down, but certainly we know that presence has an impact in prevention, if that is helpful.
Yes, it is helpful. I guess what I was sort of getting at, I was just wondering, as far as the aggravated assault, how many of those were sort of a percentage of those were related to drug, issues?
I mean, I would, again, I don't have that specific data with me. I mean, oftentimes when we do arrest someone for aggravated assault, there might be additional charges that are tacked on to that. So it would not surprise me at all if drugs were present in a lot of these situations. That would not be a surprise at all.
Thank you.
Chief,
Anything else on crime? Oh, I'm sorry.
You were mentioning that when you're looking at aggravated assault, location is part of the conversation. Do we have any maps or data that kind of explain where we're seeing, most of this happen? I think I have some assumptions, but curious what the data says.
Yeah, we did, and we presented a few months back at another crime update meeting. We were identifying, we did identify some very specific locations where aggravated assault was more prevalent. One of those locations was the downtown area. And again, we were able to move resources in because other issues were occurring downtown, such as the burglaries and the break-ins. So as we deployed those resources, we saw the numbers come down. So there are, I think we identified maybe 6 or 7 areas within the city that had an unusually high number of aggravated assaults. And over time, we've tried to move resources to those areas to get the numbers down. But unfortunately, then the problem does travel as well. So it is a bit of a shell game. We're not going in blindly. We are trying to follow data, but then as we move from one area to another, another area will pop up in red as that stuff starts to travel. But I mean, the overall message is we can be very effective in deterring certain crimes when we have a presence. That's not going to drive necessarily all crime down, but certain particular crimes, we know if we're present and we're visible, those numbers can go down. That's not for all crime, but it is for certain crime.
And an aggravated assault is one in particular that you do see that linkage.
Yeah, and I think again, just kind of telling you what the numbers were when we deployed in Charlie District, it was very, very effective.
Thank you.
I just want to give you a big shout out, Chief Zach, having a clearance rate of 63%, even when you were down tremendously. I think the community is talking. I know we see that you all are really putting a concerted effort and being really aggressive to solve crimes, especially gun crimes, gun violence. But I would dare to say that number could probably be a little bit higher based on some circumstances beyond your team and their effort. Could you kind of speak to that? Can we have a higher clearance rate, and what's attributing to the number staying like where it is or being where it is?
There's no question. Yeah, there is definitely no question, especially when you're talking about homicide, especially when you're talking about homicide that might be tied to gang activity. Certainly, the more information we have, and that's going to come from the community, because when these homicides are occurring, we're not present. That's clear. But someone always is. There's always going to be a witness. There's always going to be talk on the street. There's always going to be engagement over social media that would be extremely helpful to us in those investigations. So of course we always need to have people come forward. But what we've also talked about is our need for violence interrupters. That when we know crime is, oftentimes this stuff is, especially when you're talking about gang activity, a lot of this violence is telegraphed in advance. And if we're able to get the proper partners to work together with us, I think we can really have a significant impact on homicide, aggravated assault, and drug trafficking if we're able to get a team together and find adequate partners who want to work with APD. I think we could do a lot more in this city to get the number of shots fired calls down, to get the aggravated assaults down, to get the homicides down, and to get the victims of shootings down. So, our last key takeaway was it's all of our responsibility. So APD is willing to work. We're willing to work with partners. It's just we have to find the partners who are willing to work with us. And again, that is all of our responsibility, if that answers. And I appreciate the kind words for APD. Thank you very much, Councilmember, Vice Mayor.
And Chief Zach, I'd like to ask you a question, and I know this, it may be a silly question, but I want to ask you, when you talk about gang activity, does gang activity automatically correlates to drug activity, or is there a difference in gang activity and drug activity?
No, it's definitely tied together. I think, gang activity is very broad, and there are very well, if we're talking about, gang activity in LA or Chicago or New York City is far different than gang activity in Asheville. Okay. Are there gangs? Yes. Are they as structured, or do they have the numbers? and, you know, the organizational philosophy that you might see in large, big city gangs. No, these are more loosely connected neighborhood turf type gangs. So, you know, are we dealing with gangs? Yes. On the scale of an LA or a New York? No, no, they're not as well organized. They're not as strictly constructed.
Thank you.
Okay, if that is all, I'm going to ask Captain Moore
I think we
to.
have one more,
Oh.
Coleman Smith.
Oh, sorry.
I do have a question, rather a comment. I really liked how you pointed out the targeted operation, how you were monitoring data and deploying resources when it came to, I guess, larceny. And I was wondering, like in the future, when you do the crime data reports, if you could do that each topic, like with gun violence, how are you all monitoring the data and what resources you're deploying? That's great information and a great way for the public to see exactly how you are responding and the result of your response.
Absolutely. We're more than happy to provide that data as often as you'd like it. I can always give an update on that. Okay, if that is all, I will now invite Captain Moore up, who will give an update on the current status of our officers in basic training, in field training, and also where we stand currently with our digital advertising with Epic. So, Captain Moore,
good morning.
Take it away.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think we have done this once before. Obviously, these numbers change, and I will ensure that you have time for questions if you have it. But to get started, we have been working, the chief, more closely with staff to ensure that the committee and council is well aware of what is happening around the state and the nation when it comes to where our benefits and where we line up. We continually monitor this. It's very clear when comments and things are made, how quickly other agencies surrounding us react to that to try to one-up us. So we appreciate your willingness to work with us to try to ensure that we're competitive. We know we have to be competitive for any of this to work. And so these two things go together. So thank you for that. We currently have 10 officers that will be completing their field training in May, hopefully in May. To be fully on board to update you, that next number is wrong. We unfortunately lost one of our current staff members in the academy, so we have 4. And I think that kind of does at least let the committee know the reality of what we've said before, that the standards are still there. The state hasn't reduced that any, and this isn't an easy academy by any means. And so when we get folks out and they get into their field training, they're getting the same level of training and standard that everybody at this table received. So none of that has changed. And unfortunately, we will lose folks along the way, and we did lose one. So those folks that are still there are scheduled to graduate in July, and then they go into their field training, and hopefully we'll be completing that by end of year. We are processing 8 more applications now. We're getting close to that cutoff date if we haven't already reached it, with those individuals that will reach that July 2023 BLET class. We did try to hold that off a little bit because we've attended the Canton Job Fair. Just to kind of give you a little piece of that too, Chief Zach spoke specifically with some of those organizers to try to ensure that we, along with city HR, were there promoting the open positions that we have within the police department, but also within the city. There was a huge turnout at that event. We also attended another one last Friday at the Ag Center. And so though historically those are not huge pickups for us when it comes to career fairs and what statistics show when we attend them, we are ensuring that we're out there and that we're putting forth what we have going on with the department, as well as the openings that we have available. And so we have additional 2 or 3 more job fairs we'll be attending in April, trying to do everything we can to bolster those numbers for the next academy. We're hoping we don't continue to see 8 as the number, but we're closer to what our target is, and that's 12 to 15 in every academy class. Next slide, please. On the recruitment front to kind of give an update of our work with Epic. Those that on the committee had seen this previously and what it was, we attempted in this round to try to speak to what each of these areas mean. Obviously, we're learning. Most of us are police driven. Even in our education background, we were not social media and or analytical driven on how you get to from likes to touches to impressions to clicks. And so we tried on the next couple slides to really give a really bare bones example and explanation on what this all means. But we launched in September. Later in September, we gave that digital advertising its launch. All of this content and the ad campaigns are worked together with our social media and PIO crew here to direct what that target audience will be and where we're going based on the numbers and what we've seen previous. We do all that tailored around what that audience looks like. So we use the social media content on those platforms from what you see, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anything out there we can get onto, we're onto, so that we can try to get APD out in front of as many people as possible to drive interest. What we're seeing nationally is a lack of interest in the profession. So now we're targeting two things, not just getting them to work here for us, but getting them to want to have interest in the profession altogether. And so we're not alone in that across the country, with everyone seeing a decline in those that want to get into the job. Then we have the added piece of trying to increase their awareness to want to come to work for us. And so we're working on that each month with different ideas and campaigns to change that around. Since the launch, we have seen over 8,500 increases in clicks to the website. You'll see on the next couple slides too what that looks like. And then we've had over that 1.7 million impression numbers based on these campaigns. Next slide, please. This is what I was talking about from an idea of what this analytical data looks like. And we're learning it, so bear with us because this is not our expertise, but we're trying to get this company, who's been great to work with, to obviously train us along the way too. So those impressions are your number of views. That's what we're seeing year to date. Those clicks are who's actually getting this popped up on whatever screen they're looking at and they click on this ad. The conversions obviously is when we get them to take some sort of action. When they get to another page or they show from a digital perspective some kind of interest in the deeper dive. Getting those video views. So obviously we have some really great videos and we've talked about that. That's what Epic really drove for us, was getting us out there and showing what we have to offer, and that's getting those views. And then the interactions to that view too. What are we getting out of it once they watch this video? And then, the form fills, how many times, and we asked them to give us this from the web page that you'll see where we ask for more information and the getting paid section to get them really driven into the interest into our department. Who's taking that next step and what does that look like? That doesn't always turn out to be a candidate that we can hire, but we are seeing the activity and that's encouraging. And then those outbound clicks come a little differently, but from what you see there on the marketing list, this campaign's targeting people who have also already visited. And so it's doing what is done to all of us when we look to buy anything from Amazon. All of a sudden, you're getting offers from 5 different companies that create that specific thing you were looking to try to buy. That does this for us. If they did some sort of search to do an interest, that's how we're trying to get back in front of them again when they come back on, is to continually put the Asheville Police Department and the city of Asheville in front of them. Next slide, please. So from a summary perspective, this is just giving us our total users, those who did keyword searches on Google. Google is one of the largest campaign directions that we go, and we took that advice from Epic, who's giving us, from a national perspective where they're seeing growth in driving these campaigns. And then you see from even the explanation of what a display is, and it's on that board. And then our social media is giving us those users that come over. So we have seen an increase, as the smaller demographic section shows there. It follows what the national trend is from youngest to oldest, and where we're seeing the highest level of activity. That wasn't surprising to us, but it is pretty even across that board all the way up to the age of 44 into that next realm of 45 to 54. You're seeing that is kind of standard. And that's what we're hearing from them too, is when they drive these campaigns, who they're searching to fill these voids. And then at the bottom there, you have the number of page views and then the scrolls that we're seeing. So from an analytical perspective from Epic, they're giving us everything and more we could possibly want to try to speak to what is or isn't happening from a recruitment stance. And they're getting us in front of the largest majority of folks that we think that we can see. Now, we've compared this in recent months with what we could also see from a non-digital campaign, where we get back into some maybe older school ways of advertising, and that's billboards and newspapers and magazines. And those aren't off the table either. We're just looking at where our money is best spent and where we're going to get in front of the most people. That gives us the most attention to the web page, and then the most clicks over to seeing if somebody is actually interested in coming on board. And then the next page is just kind of a summary for the chief. If there's any questions specifically for me, I'm happy to try to help.
Okay, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. I want to ask you a question. Well, you said there's 117 people that started to fill out the applications, and I mean not applications, but intake forms, and then didn't complete them. And I was just wondering, those intake forms, are they just for contact information, or do they have questions or something on there that they need to answer?
So that's on your slide 17, if you want to go back just so everyone can see that. So this form start would be somebody on Epic's, that web page that we have, that may start entering anything into any one of those boxes, asking for additional information, and then may or may not have completed that. So they at least started it there. We will never know why they didn't complete it or what prevented them from hitting that final submit. But yes, that is somebody who saw what they saw, they got to a page and they went to ask for additional information, or could you reach out to me, and they never completed it.
And on the page before that, I think you had 84. You actually had, was it completed the form? The slide before that?
Yeah, so that was specifically how many clicked to fill out the form.
Okay.
So what you're saying is you're taking the 117 who started and the 86 who just clicked to fill it out.
Yes. Okay. Okay, I see now. So they just started it and okay, got it. Yes. So thank you. I was just wanting to know, as far as, because that's really, you know, a nice percentage of people that actually were interested. And I was just wondering how many of them actually completed, where you actually heard from them and was able to get their contact information and was able to reach out.
Yeah, so that we actually requested them, and they had never done that prior to it, but we were trying to track more than any other agency they were working with. And we wanted to know, when they click that button, how many are we getting? And that ranges, because we'll get feedback through the site, and it ranges, so everyone knows very clearly, from overseas interest that run the gamut of just looking for a job, to we even have folks that use this as like a platform to kind of rant and rave about everything under the sun. And so it doesn't really always equate to a true applicant, but we asked them to give us that data anyway so that we could really kind of track how many are taking that extra step.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Appreciate this update. I think, you know, Chief, at one point you were the one that said not only are we competing with, actually, and you just shared this, not only are we competing with other police departments, we're competing with other fields of practice. And so I think, I mean, hiring in the police department is my #1 safety priority. I can't imagine doing my job with one hand and one leg tied behind my back. And I know that's what we're doing. And I'm heartened to see some of the trends going in a safe direction. And we still have a lot of work to do. And it's not just the police department. I'm looking forward to this community responder program update from the fire department in a little bit. We talked about this earlier with the parks department and how building community prevents crimes we never even knew we'd never even be able to track. So I think there's this big picture that has been nicely brought together today for us to contextualize all of it. And I'm really happy to see how much effort and thoroughness we're putting into the hiring, because it has it's my top priority for us on safety, and I know a lot of us feel that as well. Any other thoughts or comments on this presentation? Like I said, I have some percolating thoughts around, just to kind of bounce around with my councilwomen, but I do want to hear the community responder program. I feel like we're getting such good inputs from the whole span of things. And so I'll hold those for a little bit until after the responder program presentation, which I think is our next item. So thank you, police teammates, and we will shift over to Fire Chief Patrick Crudup to share about an update on the community responder program.
All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, council. Any public that are listening in, and colleagues. I'm going to be providing the update for the community responder pilot program, and the very important work ahead of it, and where we are. Next slide, please. So for our key takeaways, the pilot program will proactively support existing efforts of Buncombe County and other partners. The plan for the pilot program is being created to evaluate the best way to positively impact the community. Staffing for the program is on track with sufficient interest among current AFD members and our new class that just graduated. We're working to finalize the initial plan and to launch that pilot program. Next slide, please. So our vision, this will be a multidisciplinary pilot program to focus collective efforts to assist persons that are unsheltered and or experiencing addictions or experiencing behavioral health issues. We will support local business and residential areas by proactively addressing concerns and quality of life issues before they escalate. So that's proactively reducing some of the numbers we may have out there now. Coordinate with Buncombe County to respond to the needs within the city. Next slide, please. For our information gathering, we're doing consistent check-ins with internal and external partners. Our recommendations from the National Alliance to End Homelessness, as well as an inner-city trip to assess low-barrier shelters in Raleigh and Carborough. Our resources, we have 18 initial staff interested in this temporary assignment, which is a great number for our organization. And with our 30 new graduates, that's going to help us make that happen. Currently, we're looking into vehicles, equipment, and office space needs for this program. Next slide, please. Our next steps for the program is selection of those 18 members. Our plan is to select five members. They have 2 teams of 2 with a manager over that program, over those 2 teams of 2. And those teams will be coordinating with Buncombe County, their community outreach team as well. Finalize the initial plan for the pilot program. That's in the process, and schedule and complete training with Buncombe County program. So that training is our crisis intervention team. That's a training that the county is doing that will help us tremendously also. And then our final step is to launch that program. Next slide, please. So here's our tentative timeline. That rough outline of the plan will be completed in the next couple of days. We want to implement on May the 1st and begin compiling and evaluating data from that 2-month pilot, June 30th, and then report out on that pilot. Next slide, please. And in summary, our key takeaways again, be proactive, support existing efforts of Buncombe County and other partners. Plan the pilot programs being created to evaluate best way to impact the community positively. And staff for the program is on track with 18 members from AFD. And to work to finalize the initial plan and launch the pilot program. Next slide. Any questions?
Thanks, Chief. I can jump in. My teammates might have some as well. So I'm very excited for this pilot. I think that y'all are setting it up and being really thoughtful. I love the pilot approach because sometimes you can think things through all you want ahead of time, but there's nothing like learning while doing and really gaining that experience. I'm excited to see the connection with training with the county folks who have been doing some of this type of programming. I think that's a strong start. A question I have is just to help me and probably the public as well. What will the day look like for one of our firefighters who's doing this? Like what are the actions? What is the experience? What services are going to be on the ground? Again, I've connected with the county's community paramedic. And so I have a sense of what the community paramedic looks like. But tell me a little bit about what direct service looks like in this pilot that you expect.
That's a good question. So some of what the community paramedics are doing would be similar. And to be clear, I think the community paramedics deals a lot with opioids. They also have a community outreach team, which are community EMTs, which are sort of closer to what we're going to be doing. So proactively reaching out, making those connections in our communities to see what needs are out there, needs they may have. So it'll be a 12-hour shift. The plan is to run it 7 days a week between ourselves and the county. That's very doable. And to make those connections and be proactive in our approach.
Is there any way for the community to be involved? Like if they saw something of interest that they wanted to report to you and your team, is there room for that? Is there a mechanism for them to get on the front end with you all? And number two, is there a possible opportunity for community volunteers to join that 2-on-2 team?
Yes, so with that multidisciplinary approach, we, as we build the plan, that is something we may could possibly add in. As like I said, we're building it. Hadn't thought about that part at the time, but it is something we could take into consideration. As far as how they reach out and connect, the community paramedics, they have a line which they call in, and there's also the non-emergency 911 line that you can reach out, and the team will be able to be reached that way as well. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Campbell.
If I could also add that I think you've heard Deputy Chief Cronich say a number of times, proactive, which means that even though we're talking probably 4 people essentially, it's boots on the ground. It's doing the surveillance. It is literally a outreach initiative. And being able to, for example, hopefully intervene when there is someone sleeping inside of a doorway, so that we are able to get that person the help and assistance that they need, and so that the business owner, the employees, or the customer is not having to engage that individual, not having the appropriate probably training to be able to manage that situation appropriately. And Patrick, if I went too far, let me know, because it's kind of a vision. It is when we grow up, this is essentially the service we want to provide.
Yes, ma'am. What I would like to add also is, so for the needs that may arise from our community, we're in contact and been working with the Behavioral Health Justice Coalition, which would be like a central hub for us to address needs for those we may come into contact in our proactive approach.
You're muted.
Thanks, team. Another question, is there a geographic focus for this 4-person team?
So our main focus currently for this pilot program would be the CBD, but we will address wherever the need is also.
And then a follow-up, which might be more of a Manager Campbell question is, so this is a pilot, and we will, run this in May and June, and then do some learning and processing and consider if we want to extend it, what the resources would look like, and that timing of consideration would come in the summertime. And so just kind of a question, like, say this is everything our vision hopes, and this really starts to fill a gap, and it fills a need, and the pilot's over June 30. Do we have to wait till next spring's budget cycle to consider making this a permanent thing? I know with pilots, you can't solve everything at the outset, but curious if any of that thinking has been done of what would extending or growing it look like, and how does that play with budget timing and resources?
Absolutely. We have done a little bit of thinking about this in terms of funding, and we think that we can absorb within the existing budget some of the expenses, because these individuals are working for us now, right? So we've got a little bit of leverage there. But we, from a staff perspective, strongly feel that the opioid settlement resources are ideal for this type of an initiative. And Patrick, I'll turn it over to you to see if you have any additional thoughts or if I've misrepresented.
Before you pass it on the opioid settlement, I'll say amen to that. I don't think we should give up the opportunity to use the opioid settlement money to fund some new initiatives that we're starting, either this initiative or the one that was in an earlier discussion around violence interruption.
Thank you, Shanika. Appreciate that support. Patrick, did I overlook anything?
No, ma'am. I think I missed the last part because the tones were going off here in the station, so I missed the last part you were saying. I'm sorry.
Okay, not a problem. We were talking about the opioid settlement, that funding for this initiative, we may be able to use some of that funding to support this, because we think there's a strong linkage between the two, the goals of that settlement and from a service delivery, what this community responder, hopefully permanent program could look like. But obviously that money will run out, but we can do better planning, but we will have an initial startup if we were to utilize that funding source.
Yes, ma'am, I agree.
I don't know if my peers have any final comments, but I do want to add again, this gives me hope. I think that there's something that this is different and new for us to step into. I feel like y'all are being really thoughtful, and we've had this vision of reimagining public safety, and like, this is part of what it looks like. And hearing T. Tyrell talk about community building, this is part of what it looks like. I feel really excited amidst sharing the fears and concerns that a lot of our community members have about violent crime increasing. So I think that good things are yet to come. With that, an idea that I've been mulling around, and I know, Deborah, we've chatted about this briefly, but just wanted to kind of talk about with my peers on council is, again, as we're seeing across 3 different departments just in today's call that are directly on kind of public safety as it touches crime and health, I'm wondering what it looks like in the next 12 months to 18 months. Like, where are we landing with all of this work? And I also think about the council retreat we just had, where there was a lot of consensus between us women on council about what public safety could look like. And we did some real good work around goals. And so I'm curious if we could ask staff to continue looking across the departments and look at the goals that we were setting during the retreat and kind of synthesize those goals and look forward. So what we're hearing today is a lot of the crime data, where we've been, what we've been working on today, and what we're starting to pilot. But I want to see in 12 months, where are we going to be? In 18 months, where are we going to be? What is that strategy for public safety pulled together Not so that we can set unrealistic expectations that we're never going to meet, but so that we can put a flag in the ground today and say, we're working our butts off across this entire organization. Here's what we're going to try. Here's what we're going to look towards. And then that way in a year or 18 months, depending on the window that feels right, we can really track our progress. And I think it would also help us, to have that lens from the city management perspective where it's across all of these different departments where we're doing good work. I mean, even street lighting plays a role in this. There's so many places that our organization is touching this. Public safety is not just a police department function. It's really in every place. But sometimes it can be hard to see across the entire organization for where we're all rowing in that same direction. So kind of the idea is, does this feel like a time that us calling to the organization to kind of pull together this 12-month strategy for public safety so that we can look at it, we can get creative if necessary with our policy roles, and it can also help us be thinking about the resourcing that we make decisions on over time. Manager Campbell.
So a couple of things. I appreciate those comments. The next steps for what the work that you all did at the retreat is we are massaging those goals. We have asked every department head to look at the goals, look internally at their initiatives, and make those linkages for us so that when we come back to you all in like late to mid-April, we will be providing you with, here are all the initiatives. This is what you should expect in terms of deliverables over the next 12 months in terms of your priority around reimagining public safety or reparations or whatever. And hopefully we will also be connecting those resource dots to the goals and the initiatives. That I think Chairperson Ullman will help somewhat answer the question, but we may need to do some refinement in terms of what types of things then would come to this committee that you all, can oversee, not in a micromanagement way, but in terms of a policy effort and initiative that would come back to the committee for you all to review, and it'll be a part of your work program on an ongoing basis going into next fiscal year.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that's very exciting that it will be across all the goals that we talked about and all the priority areas. I think this is very aligned with kind of the thinking I'm having of where are we going forward? How can we be even better? And doing that with a real lens of reality. We hear a lot, we have a lot of staffing challenges across every department. And so this isn't a let's set policy goals because we're politicians and we just want to say rah, rah, rah. This is about being part of the team to say, where are we going to take on a challenge in the next 12 months? How can we all be rowing in the same direction from our seats on council, from your seats and boots on the ground on staff, and just really having clarity so that we're all moving in the same direction. I think that'll be really, really constructive. And so it sounds like in April, by our April meeting, that we'll be able to take a look at that at the public safety lens here and probably the environment one as well, since that also connects. So we can kind of get into discussion as a team on this committee into what that looks like. And if there's any policy leadership that we want to contribute to the thinking on that could be started in April.
Yes, ma'am. It also is an opportunity for you all may recall in the retreat when we gave you all a list of the things that we are currently working on. Yes. And you all said, oh my goodness, you guys are working on all of this stuff? And we said, yes. And you all were like, well, we didn't know. And that's what we are trying to help address is the not only elected officials knowing what we are doing, but the community as well. Because we hear a lot, we'll know what you're doing. Tell us, Deborah, what are you doing? And
Yeah.
so I think this is definitely a way for us to connect and this will be even just the high priority things. This will not include all of the day-to-day things that we are doing. We're calling it an organizational work program where everybody is rowing in the same direction, not to take away from what they deliver on a daily basis, but how can they contribute to addressing these priorities that you all have established for us over the next 12 months.
That's really exciting. I love that we're all seeing a path forward together. That'll help, things to just, as you're developing that, to keep in mind. I think sometimes it's very easy to think about the output, not the outcome. And so a project is not an outcome. Hiring a person is not an outcome, right? Those people will give us the tools to do X. So that's always just a good flag, I think. Vice Mayor Kilgore or Councilwoman Smith, any thoughts to add to this, or any things to kind of inform how staff is going to be working on this over the coming months? Or is this a bad idea? Anything really? What do y'all think?
I think the plan that Ms. Campbell shared, I call you Ms. Campbell sometimes, I just can't help it, but that Deborah shared with us, I think that's going in the right direction. And I think it gives you some insight about how each department is working to put those initiatives in place that we stated were our top priorities. But I think another thing that we should put our eye on as a committee is to go back to the plan of activities that are already in place before we met for the retreat. And I think then we can consolidate what's being done, what's a continuation of work being done, and newer ideas, or even the things that we discussed today, to figure out what the next 12 months will look like.
That's absolutely what we will hope to do, is to say, here was the things that were already on our work program. Do they need to be completed this year, or do they roll into the next year?
Or have priorities changed?
Exactly.
Because it's, no one ever wants to take something off the list, but we need to be focused to get the targets that we want. And I think that's an important role leadership is to help with that. Any other thoughts from the team?
I do want to go back to a thought that I had earlier while the presentation was going on about community responders. I just kind of see an opportunity for community members to be trained on how to respond to certain activities or behaviors in front of their business, or if they encounter something that might be a little unsettling for them. I'm just wondering if that type of training is available to community members, maybe through this pilot program or any other avenue. Because I think the more that we educate our community and train them on how to respond, then I think we manage the issue a little bit better, and not always blame or expect another person to show up. It'll be a all hands on deck type of effort that's well trained and everybody is informed what to do.
Yes, ma'am, Councilwoman Smith. So there is in the development of this program, there will be an educational piece to educate our community members as well while we're out.
And then just to take that a little bit further, like I stated before, there are a lot of our community members who have backgrounds in crisis response, and they might be willing to volunteer their time to join a team, just to be that community representative, or offer that peer support or whatever expertise to your team.
Okay, thank you.
It's really thoughtful, Shanika. I think that, it just pushes the conversation further out again of everybody can be part of this solution. And there's times that it's not appropriate for an average citizen, right? So like, and that, like, let's have that conversation with the folks who are interested. We don't want anyone in a dangerous situation, but we'll have the insight into like, what are the healthy boundaries of a place that is really great for someone to chip in and places that you need to call a professional. And I think that really just widens the circle. I appreciate that. Okay, I think that'll wrap the community responder section of the agenda on item 6. And now we will go to the second opportunity for public comment, which will be the last item on our agenda. Katie, do we have any folks in the queue today?
I'm checking right now. One moment.
Thank you.
No, I do not.
All right. Thanks to all the staff. It takes a lot of work to pull this together. It takes a lot of work to do all this work. And I feel like I said earlier, we are not at our best point ever when it comes to public safety. And I see us moving in the right direction with everybody's really hard work. So congratulations on the hard work. Let's keep it up. Really looking forward to looking at all of this effort through goals and initiatives in April, so we can help really say in the next month, in the next year, where are we going to be? Where are we going to be even better? And we can really create that future we need. So with that, I will adjourn. Thanks, everybody. Do we have to do a motion to adjourn? I think we just adjourned. I'll get this one day. Bye, everybody.